Do you think momentum is a real thing? That's the basic question here. And if you need me to talk more about what that possibly means, let me know.
So, yes, but with a little bit of like a caveat. That do I think that if one doesn't believe that momentum exists, then momentum doesn't exist. In that I don't think that inherently having, thrown three picks in a row makes it more likely, unless there's something that the defense has like figured out about you that is why they're getting those picks. So we're ignoring those situations where you make three bad plays that have ended three drives. I don't think, assuming that you're able to learn, that makes it more likely that you're going to do it in the next drive. But then you add the psychological layer on top of it. And if you start believing, which I think is natural, it's human, that you can't do it because you haven't been doing it, then it will have an impact on you. So I I understand, this was a real big analytics movement. I remember the first person I remember was Bill Barnwell in like the 2013-14 range, just being like, momentum doesn't exist. And he would like show all these examples about how, and it's like, yeah, I agree with the idea that just because you score a touchdown at the end of the half doesn't mean that you necessarily will come out of the next half playing better, unless you believe it means that, because that actually really does impact, and that's been shown in studies all over in performance. Even something as simple as telling kids they'll do well on a math test improves their math scores. So like, you the internal belief is all that matters. And I think most players and most humans do believe that when they're doing things well, they're going to continue doing things well. So that's why I would say I think momentum does exist.
Yeah, okay, cool. So let me follow up on that. So uh what's the do you have like a, I don't mean like a but do you have like a mechanism in mind for how your belief that you're doing well is going to, and you believe in momentum or whatever, that does impact your subsequent play? Because because here's the contrast, right? So there's like one this study by actually I had it here, but Tversky was one of them, about the hot hand fallacy, right, in basketball, where like if you made a couple shots, you're more likely to make the next shot, essentially. And they found essentially no, right, like that the shots are independent, despite the sort of all the perceptions about them not being independent, about it being more likely that you'll make the next one if you've made the last several. Uh, and so that looks like it's evidence that your your essentially momentum is just an illusion, right? If you take the hot hand fallacy and momentum to be the same kind of thing, where I guess they're yeah, you could read them the same way. One's kind of like individual level and one's team level, but whatever. Um, so I guess a first question is, what do you make of that? Is that a counterpoint to your belief that momentum is a real thing? And if not, why?
I think it's an important counterpoint, but I don't think it's dispositive that momentum's not a real thing. I think that because the important part to me is that when you believe you can do something, you will try things that you may not try before. And so even if your ability to do things hasn't changed, the fact that you're willing to do things that you wouldn't be willing to do if you didn't believe in yourself can change the outcome.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. That's exactly what my complaint was with this study, right? So I was going to quote from the abstract. They say, after analyzing these like successes and failures, and seeing whether like a string of successes makes it more likely that you'll make the next shot, they say the outcomes of previous shots influenced these players' predictions about their performance, but not their performance. Uh, so that is, they thought that they were going to be, if they made several in a row, they thought they were going to be doing better on the next shot than they actually were. Um, but I think you're right, right? Like if you're feeling good, you're feeling like you're playing well, then you will try things that you wouldn't have tried in other situations. But if you think you're playing terribly, right? And so that wasn't really captured by their, as far as I could tell. I mean, I didn't read the whole study, but those it looks like they were just looking at like strings of shooting basically, and a lot of them were free throw shootings. So I don't know that there's, yeah. I mean, I think you're right essentially that your confidence in how you're doing does impact the things that you will try, and if you're a good player, then you'll try things and be successful more often. Even not more often than you would have been otherwise. It's just more often because you're a good player, right? So I think I agree.
And
I think there's a mechanism there for it to be a real thing.
and especially when you get into more and more complex things, the free throw is a very simple, you know, essentially controlled environment, which is why I'm assuming they chose it for the study. But performance, I think, when it comes to things like momentum, involves these very complicated situations, where you're making multiple decisions and trying to get something done. And when you're doing something like reading a defense, when you're having a good day, you might just trust your eyes a little bit more. That helps you go through the progression faster. Whereas if you're having a bad day, you might not trust what you're seeing, and it prevents you from getting to where you need to get. And I think that's all a component of trying things. It's that belief helps you kind of push through. And there is a study that I find very compelling too. The study that I think it was actually with free throw shooting as well, basically hypothesizing that well learned behaviors, when you are under pressure, you perform them better. But poorly learned behaviors, when you're under pressure, you perform them worse. And I think there's a component there. So some of that is just about like cerebellar, like non-cerebral things, when it comes to athletics. But I think some of it too is like when you think you're good, then I think it allows you to, again, you'll do things that you wouldn't do before, and you'll push in ways that you wouldn't have pushed before. And a lot of what we see in athletics is that sometimes it's just the person that's still pushing at the end that ultimately wins. Like if you're trying to find a solution when your opponent has given up on trying. And why do you give up? Because you think you can't. And why do you keep trying? Because you think you can, and you think you can do it. And I think that's where momentum really comes into play.
Yeah, that's cool. And then that even like allows it to be as like it could carry over from one game to the next, right? Like it could be the kind of thing. It's like, oh, this is working. We're gonna keep riding this, like whatever we're doing right now, whatever a bunch of pocket shots against cover twos or whoever, like whatever the offense is doing or whatever the defense is doing that's working. They might just have the confidence to keep trying sort of absurd plays. And so if you do get that, yeah. So I think right. I think we're on the same page here. And just the fact that there is sort of like the particular plays or particular events are still independent or outcomes are still independent doesn't mean that there is a mechanism whereby momentum would actually be really affect the process and the outcome.
And maybe, like, for example, if you're Mahomes and you don't believe in yourself, do you even ask if we could throw wasp? Like,
Right.
do you even, like, that confidence is important. And someone like Mahomes, he's having a bad day and he still has that confidence. But for the vast majority of us, like, we need some result to give us that confidence. We don't just inherently always believe we can do everything. So I think that's where it can really play to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I also think just one other thing about these, like sometimes when people talk about it being a real thing or not being a real thing, I think they're talking past each other, right? Like there's also like the feeling of like, oh, we're on a roll now, right? And like no one should deny that one can feel that sometimes, right? Like that's a real feeling, right? And that's a fun feeling too. It's also the compliment is not that fun, right? But we're getting steamrolled right now, right? But both of those are real things as well. So like even if we're wrong here in our speculations about how momentum might make you try things, and if you're good, be successful, uh, there's still something that one can't really deny the existence of, namely the feeling of you know being on a roll or whatever.
Well, and that's why I'm so confident, is that because you're right, you can't deny the existence of that feeling, and maybe not specifically in the sports scenario, but in general, I don't think you can deny the association between feeling and performance just in life. Like, people do better at everything when they feel good, even if they're happy. Forget thinking you're good at it. Just being happy makes you do better at things. So, it seems very unlikely to me then that there wouldn't be some, even like placebo effect. Like, how many studies have shown the effect of just telling people a medicine will work makes their subjective experience of the medication better, and
Yeah.
objective measures of improvement, like even things like vital signs are improve. So I, it's clear that there's a huge psychological aspect, and this kind of goes back to what I feel like I say way too often, but I just think that life is a subjective experience. How you feel and how you frame things completely impacts how your life goes, and we choose to view it how we want to view it, but it also affects our performance and not just our subjective experience.
Mm, that's nice. Nice to tie it in with the subjective. Yeah, that's right.